thought yesterday, I've been doing this, working with a board, just me as an executive director or a president, CEO, for 31 years. So I've had lots of board members. I've had the good, the bad, and the ugly. And let me tell you, when you have the good, treasure every moment, because in a moment you can go from the good to the ugly. So reassurance for you, this too shall pass. That's my mother's favorite saying. And we always like to think that, oh, I love this board member. I wish they could stay forever. Folks, the next time you say that, remember that there's a reason there are term limits. And that person will appreciate it too, because at some point, the passion, the fire, the drive that a board member may have for your organization originally may diminish and not be a part of their personality anymore, or their willingness to serve. And you want to get them at their peak and keep them at their peak. So it's one of those things that you look at, it says, it sounds promising. When I was hired almost 20 years ago by the Moline Foundation, I was their first staff person. They had essentially been a foundation in a file drawer. They had gone from the office of one chairman for 17 years to another board chairman for 20 years to another board chairman for 14 years, and had been around since 1953. But they had done this all with a 5-member board that had no term limits. So obviously, when you're looking at the idea of having officers, the officers, when I say 20, 17, and 14 years, they did not have term limits either. And it was only when the board chairman retired or just said, I've had enough, or I'm going to another job. It really was a demanding job for a board chairman to administer grant making and receive gifts 3 times a year. They did grant making. So this very small, comparatively board, when the current board chairman in 1999, 2000, he announced that he was going to retire. Thank goodness his wife said, no, you're not bringing this home. You're not operating the Moline Foundation out of your den. We are going to officially retire from everything. And so then the board set out and hired me as their first staff person. So one of my jobs the first year was to not only look, they were all appointed by different organizations in the community. And the bylaws were very strict that they had to be a part of the community by being a representative of the city, or a representative of United Way, and those organizations appointed members to the board. They couldn't even remember, some of them, what organization they were supposed to be affiliated with. And they also were supposed to be there was no ethnic requirement or gender requirement, except for they had one woman on the board that was appointed from the largest women's organization in the Quad Cities, or in Moline. So that happened to be, back in 1953, that was King's Daughters, which was a non-denominational women's group, religious affiliation. And so King's Daughters had appointed this woman, and she'd been on the board. She ended up until 3 years ago, she was my longest serving board member. Great board member, but we knew that it was time for a change. So we instituted board limits, board terms, and we had them sunshine in the current board members so they could stay on as long as they wanted to. And then we increased the size of the board from 5 until 10. That can be done if you enter an organization. Do not be shy. If you've got 36, 38, you know, the nonprofit board source, great organization, I've got it as resources at the end of the presentation. They say that the average board size in the United States is 15. So if you got a board that's larger than that, we have our United Way board is 38. At one time, our Junior Achievement Board, which goes from Burlington up to Dubuque and centered in Moline with headquarters there, they had 52. Now, if you can imagine the negatives of 52, yes, you got representation from outlying areas and regional opportunities for funding and grant making and donor relations, but also you have 52 people that are expected to come. Where do you hold it? Think of the agendas, the materials that you have to pass out. And those poor board members, when they show up, are they even going to have a chance to speak? If you have a 2-hour meeting and everybody speaks for just 2 minutes, your time's gone. And it was increasingly apparent that with those 52 board members were not having an opportunity to speak, and their attendance was going down. Even though they had many committees and task forces, they had difficulty meeting quorum. So if you're 26 people. I mean, even if quorum is 26. So look at that. And don't be afraid to go in and change your bylaws. We're going to talk a little bit more about, as we go on, about retention and attracting a good board. But I wanted to start by showing you some of the materials that I recommend. And I'm a great reader. I love the resources we have in the Quad Cities. Your best resource might be in the future to go to the Rock Island Public Library. There's a group in the area called the Association of Fundraising Professionals. It's AFP. And about 20 years ago, we designated the Rock Island Public Library in the main reference section as materials for nonprofit management, fundraising, board development. If you go into the Rock Island Public Library or just call the reference desk, you can access materials online, and you can also do grant making and research. I'm not sure how many of you are involved in grant making, but that is one resource that you can go and have. And they have a number of these books. These may be available also for your online system as to check them out, and you could get them in. The Muscatine Library can access them with the library system through Davenport and Bettendorf. You do not physically have to go to Rock Island, but you could call them on the phone and say, do you have anything on board? They'll pull things. They've got all kinds of printed materials as well as books and magazines. So this is Simon Sinek. I don't know. He's really infamous for being on TED Talks, and this is Start with Why. Why great leaders inspire others to take action. And a great little book. Might be a gift to your board chairman if you're thinking things are kind of faltering, and might find some inspiration from somebody outside the organization. Daniel Pink has written Drive. Again, he's got a great TED Talk. I have heard him speak in person, and this is the surprising truth about what motivates us. I won't ruin the suspense. Go ahead and look in here and see what does truly motivates us, not only in the nonprofit world, but in the world in general. And it's a great, thoughtful book. Here's another book from one of my favorite Association of Fundraising Professionals author. I've heard him speak a number of times, Gerald Panis. He just passed away last year, but it's called Asking. It's a 59-minute guide to everything board members, volunteers, and staff must know, and look at the print in it. It's one of those you could take home and read in half an hour, 45 minutes, or just highlight. You're never a loser until you quit trying. But it's not only good, it's just got really good everything. I always wanted to just write it down in a sticky note and put it on the wall, because it's great material for looking at what you would like to do with your board. This is another great book. I give this to our new board members. It's called Giving 2.0, And even if they haven't had Giving 1.0, 2.0 is a great book. Again, easy to read. It even has bullets and checkpoints and stops and asks you questions. It's got a lot of stories in it that I think your board can relate to. Transform your giving and our world. This one is from Emerson and Church, which is a great publication company, and it's easier than you think, nonprofit finance. And if for anybody struggles at the beginning looking at financial statements and things, there's a number of differences between nonprofits and business financial information, and this is what it takes. I have a colleague in Champaign, Illinois, that runs a community foundation just like we are here in the Quad Cities, and of course your community foundation in Muscatine. But she does a session as, so you want to go to jail? Everything you need to know about nonprofit finance, because you would be surprised at the people that get on a board and kind of fake it looking at nonprofit. You know, they expect the finance chairman or the board chairman or the treasurer to look at it. It's even good for you as a staff person to go through and look at this. And I'm going to pass this around because it's got, it's the gold standard in 1 hour books. They guarantee you can read these in an hour. Asking is on there, the one I just showed you. Great boards for small groups. Fundraising habits and successful boards. And then I also highlighted in here is some of the things that you can look at to make sure that you're financially successful, and looking at your fiduciary and legal responsibilities of a board. So I'll just pass that around if you want. Strategies for board engagement are, we could do hours on this topic. So I've pulled together some of my favorite materials that I've used in my 30 years of working with a board, and it's all trial and error because, like, every board is different because there are different personalities. Every session that I would teach on this would be reflective of my most recent situations. So right now, knock on wood, I have the best board in the Quad Cities. And I really, really appreciate them. They are a 10-member board that are all independent thinkers. They represent different segments of the population. We're diverse. We represent different genders. We are everything that I've always wanted to have a board be. Now, in the past 20 years, that hasn't necessarily been the case, but I'm going to give you some materials, and we're going to start off with, if you're looking on your handouts, let's start off with a short quiz for your board. So one of these things that you can do is give this to your board on a regular basis and ask them questions about what they can do to be an important board member in fulfilling their duties. So some of these questions may seem very simple, but remember, for a number of board members that are, this may be their first board that they've ever been on. They may never have dealt with going to a meeting and having an agenda, having a different type of materials that are passed out to them. So please be conscious of the fact. There also may be people that are very mature board members that haven't seen the types of material and don't know exactly what you do. So a couple of these questions, if you're looking on the materials, are number one, our executive director and board chair work effectively together. That's something that is very important to your organization, is that your head of your staff members should be working on a regular basis. They determine what they want. Is it weekly, quarterly, monthly, whatever works for them? Maybe it's just emails every so often. But they are working together. They're a united team because that's the person that your staff person at the head of your organization, whatever you call it, ED, CEO, whatever, that's the person that you're looking at having do your different things that deal with the board and management of the organization. The second question is, board members have a clear agenda, yes or no? Every meeting, be it task force, committee, board meeting, they should all have an agenda. And your board members will appreciate that, for having a clear outline and having you stick to what is on a piece of paper or an email that is sent ahead of time. You want to keep board members, send them materials on a timely basis so they know that they're getting something 5 to 7 business days before a meeting. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll email them the materials, but then follow up with written paper copies so that they have something that confirms that, like, oh, I didn't see my email 2 days ago. But especially for retirees or people that are temporarily out of town on vacation or whatever, you can see that they get written materials and they have that in place. The third thing is the board chair leads effective board meetings. Okay, what's an effective board meeting? To me, it would be one that values people's time. It values their confidentiality, that they're speaking in a board meeting openly, but their fellow board members are not going to repeat that at the next cocktail party at the country club. They know that they're able to speak openly and honestly, and they will express that by feeling good about the organization. Another question would be, is board members undergo an effective orientation process? Yes or no? So what we're asking our board members to do is to fill this out. An effective orientation process is best done with the head of the organization, your CEO, ED, is that person sits down with a new board member after they're chosen and before their first board meeting. You should have a board notebook. Don't tell them to go online. Have something, a written notebook that looks very official, that has your bylaws, your articles of incorporation, maybe your last financial statement. Have the materials for the next meeting, or if you don't have that, it's a couple of months off or in a month or so and you haven't developed it, go ahead and give them the materials from the last meeting and go through what the process is, that this person gives this report, or we have a consent agenda, or what is looking for those materials. I can't impress upon you enough. You never get a second chance to make a first impression, and that would be true with your orientation session. Have it at your office, have them meet all your staff. This is not the time to take them on a client visit or have a client come in and talk about how wonderful the organization is, or you really helped us succeed in the community. This is your opportunity to go and look at what is coming on the board. Now, it isn't just the staff person. I think you should invite another board member, ideally your board chairman. If that isn't possible, another officer. And those board members can say, well, what do you think? Oh, well, frankly, I think we should go to a consent agenda, or I think that we have too many materials that we pass out, or you'll get some ideas on how effective you as the head staff person or the person that is running your nonprofit is able to respond to the concerns of a board chairman or another board member. This is also the time to explain the responsibilities of a committee, so that new board member can say, oh, well, let me think about it, and I'll think about what I would like to be involved in, whether it's a programmatic area, whether it's financial, whether it's governance, executive committee. Would you be interested in being an officer in a few years? What type of an officer would you like to be? Think of their passion, their interests, and their background. but don't pigeonhole them necessarily by, oh, you work in a bank, you're a great treasurer. Maybe that person would rather be the head of a program committee and get to see what the money actually does by going out and working with clients, or even the ability to do some fundraising. So if you go on, and the second page there is all board members sign a contract or board member agreement upon joining. This can be respective to your nonprofit. I didn't put an example of one in here because you just say, I as a board member am available to be with the board and will respect other board members. Put what your internal goals as a board are. That's an interesting exercise to do if you're going to do a board retreat or a strategic planning session. Or what do you think that should be the 4 things that we ask of a new board member? That they be on time, that they respect the time of others, that they will fulfill their fiduciary responsibilities by reading materials that are sent to them ahead of time, and so that you have the opportunity to get some input from people. Now, this also continuing down with the board quiz, we have a clear nomination process for new board members, and all board members are financially literate. That book I'm passing around about nonprofit and financial management is a good thing to have. And then also we're looking at continuing the board quiz, number 11. All board members set personal goals for the year and clarify how the organization could support them. And it's documented in a personal development plan. This sounds kind of overwhelming, especially if you have 52 board members. But it's the idea that somebody says, in the next year, I'm going to talk publicly to a service organization. Now, they aren't just going to go out to Rotary or Kiwanis or whatever service organization. You're going to give them a PowerPoint or a brochure or materials, and they're just going to talk about what they feel like the organization is doing. I think people are respective of volunteer board members, knowing that they do not have to necessarily go out and be the instant expert on their organization. So feel free to have them say, would you like to come with me to my next speaking engagement? Or I hear you have a great aunt at the nursing home or at the assisted living center, and they're looking for speakers over the lunch hour. Would you be willing to come with me? And think of what a thrill that is to come and represent your nonprofit. Number 12, all board committees set and document goals for the year, and the board has a clear process for evaluating the executive director or president CEO. We're a community foundation, the Moline Foundation, and we have national standards that we meet nationally. And one of those standards is a requirement that the head of the organization, the president, CEO, or the executive director, is evaluated on an annual basis. That should be a given. Now, if you're new, it might be that you're evaluated every 6 months. There are all kinds of materials that are available online. Again, you could go and ask for materials for the Rock Island Public Library, or just look at BoardSource to have different types of evaluations and even different types of pay structures for nonprofit organizations in the country. So if you employ 20 employees or less, I use materials from the Iowa Council on Foundations out of Des Moines, and I also use materials from AFP. We do a survey of the 55 community foundations in the state. Maybe your organization has a comparable national or regional affiliation where you can look at an evaluation or what types of pay increases would be appropriate for your nonprofit. Okay, the key, you go in and you're going to look for the total number of yes responses. The person that's filling this out then is 10 to 13, is superior, great board member, great organization, 7 to 9, good. They do not sign this. They turn them in. They self-check first, and then you add them up real quickly and say, okay, the average is 8. That's good, but we could do better. And then look at the ones where people have indicated that this is what your board needs to work on. Look at your current board demographics. Does the board's ethnic mix represent the community it serves? Is there gender diversity? What about age diversity? Are all generations represented? Are you geographically diverse? Do you have rural and urban? Do you have the idea of somebody from the city, maybe somebody from the county? Maybe because you're on the border, do you have somebody from Illinois? A lot of Illinois rural people use Muscatine as their service center and are going across the bridge to access not only social services, but retail and the opportunity to get involved. So don't look upon your donors, and maybe there's somebody out there that not necessarily they give a lot of money, but maybe they're a regular donor and somebody that for 5 or 10 years has every year supported you faithfully. Maybe that's somebody that has a passion because they have a child or a family member that has used your services. Do you have what other groups are important to the organization and should be represented on the board? If you do have, again, those service organizations, those memberships, maybe you do need somebody that from Rotary or Kiwanis or Lions or whatever civic organization you're looking for. When aiming for diversity, don't let the demographics be the only factor you can consider. Above all, your board members must be leadership material. So however you define a leader, Google it, what is a leader? And you'll find hundreds of articles. But that person or those people should be on your board as leadership material. Now, are all of them going to be a board chairman or an officer? No. But they are expected to lead your organization regardless of the size of your board, especially as a spokesperson and a person who is going to go out and reflect the values and the intent and the purpose that you have in your nonprofit. So it's vitally important that you choose somebody that has leadership potential and is leadership material. So for a successful board, recruit successful, effective leaders. It's a core squad that knows and understands strategic plans. Years ago in the mid-'80s, I worked for the Moline Public Schools, and I had a superintendent that told me our school board will never be successful without at least one person from Deere & Company. Now, you have in Muscatine, you have Han, you have wonderful corporate giants in the world that know the importance of strategic plan. These are not mediocre businesses. These are stellar businesses that you're able to go out and look at. I'm thinking of Kent Feeds or, just the other organizations, the companies, the businesses that you have. Maybe it's a smaller size, but have somebody that knows the value of a strategic plan. I love people that come in and have a passion and the time and the energy to be on a board, but you've got to have at least 2 or 3 that know what a strategic plan is and the value of planning for not only a business, but a nonprofit. So you should also provide frequent governance information. I listed a couple of resources here, blueavocado.org. and wildorchid.org. And don't ask me, I looked and I couldn't find any reason why they're named like that, but you do remember Blue Avocado. Blue Avocado has some wonderful materials, and you can sign up for their emails, the regular emails on their blog, and you can pass those along to your board on maybe a weekly basis. Let's call it the Friday update, or you can send it before a board meeting and have them do a quiz, and then have the idea of getting to know board members. Every once in a while, I'll throw out of a question at the beginning of a board member. You remember, we're all social animals. We all want to get together and know somebody's name and get to know people. And so give your board a little opportunity to maybe at the beginning of a board meeting to say, what is the best 5 minutes you've had this summer? And they describe standing on a mountaintop or playing with their grandchildren, and you get to know person a little bit better. Or we have, I call it a brag moment, and we go around the table and talk about something they personally have achieved, or maybe it's something that their child or their grandchildren have done. And you'd be surprised how diverse it is, you know, the first soccer game, or somebody that has been appointed to a new job. And you have humble people sitting on your board most of the time. So they are going to maybe want to talk about themselves in a way that wouldn't have the opportunity for, like, how's your summer been? Oh, it's okay. Well, give them a chance to really shine and have that as a regular thing on the agenda. You know, getting to know your board. It's just an opportunity that you have to promote social welfare within your board, and a matter of trust and getting to know people. Each board member should develop a document of expectations with the board's self-evaluation. I've got that at the very end as a handout. And a lot of people deal with youth or young people as their clients. Maybe big brothers, big sisters. I know Krista had talked about even with that organization, maybe the Y. Maybe you're a nonprofit that is dealing with Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. And the temptation is to put a young member on your board because you want to get their input and you're developing leadership. Please remember that under the letter of the law, those people are not adults until they're 21. And they have a fiduciary responsibility to read those financial statements and participate in a discussion that may end up hiring or firing employees, making financial and investment decisions. These are kind of higher level things that I personally feel a young person should not be on the board. Too often what happens is that youth or the teenager, whatever age you have, even somebody who's at a 19, 20-year-old basis will go home and tell their parents, and the parents are the ones that are reading the materials and telling them how to vote, and then that betrays the confidentiality of the whole idea of having a board that trusts each other. So I think it's important for you to look at the age of the people that you have. Maybe there's the opportunity for that person, young person, to sit on a task force or to be a member of an organization that is affiliated with you, or to do a short-term committee assignment. So you can use them in other ways, but I would caution against them due to the legal ramifications. Here are the typical skills that are needed by a nonprofit on your board: legal expertise, financial management or accounting background, marketing skills, fundraising ability, program expertise specific to the organization, long-range planning skills, good communication skills, the ability to lead, the ability to govern. Now, I think that would be very, very rare if you had one person that fulfilled all those. But every once in a while, you'll find somebody that's pretty good on maybe 3 out of 8. And you need to appreciate what they're good at, but also learn that maybe they're on the board to acquire a different skill. Maybe they would like to know more about the programmatic activities. I had a board member a couple of years ago, and we had to go out and individually call on some donors. And so I asked him if he would go with me, because I knew he was good friends. They were in a dinner club together and with 2 of these couples. And so he said afterwards at the board meeting, he said, "Joy, I don't do fundraising." And I said, "Oh, no, I respect that." I said, we won't do fundraising. And he said, "Okay, So we went and had coffee with the first couple, and we just chatted for about half an hour. And I said I'd send him some materials, and we got back in the car, and he goes, "Oh, that wasn't so bad." He goes, I don't do fundraising. I said, "Tom, this is not fundraising, this is friend raising." And you can always use that term. If you think fundraising is a dirty word with your board, just say we're going to go out and do some friend raising. And ask them if you can have a joint appointment with their accountant or their attorney, or say, I'd like to talk to them about estate planning, or there's somebody who I know is leaving the community. Maybe they would like to leave a gift. They've been on the board before. You remember you served on the board with them. Can we go call on them before they move from the community or they retire? So there's that opportunity for somebody to be a fundraiser that is actually not doing fundraising. You're doing friend raising. Connections. It's also helpful to have people with connections. You have access to foundations, corporations, individual philanthropists, media contacts, political contacts, and contacts with professional or service organizations. I'm going to say one thing about political contacts. Our board actually has within its bylaws that when we passed our new bylaws 20 years ago, we put in there that you cannot run for public office or you cannot hold an elected public office. This is to avoid a conflict of interest, and every day I am so thankful in our divisive atmosphere that I don't have one side versus the other, and I don't have an elected judge or an elected city council person complaining about the different forms of government. That is not. Try to make your nonprofit as neutral as possible. I've also told our board, I can't control how you think, feel, or vote, but no yard signs, no bumper stickers. Try to be as non-political as you can during, especially during an especially divisive electoral season. I even told one of our board members he was really disturbed what was going on with our school board about 15 years ago. And so he said, I'm going down tomorrow and I'm picking up nomination papers. And I said, well, you're going to have to choose. You're vice chairman of our board and you can't even take out nomination papers. You're going to have to choose. Look at the bylaws. And so I sent him a copy of the bylaws. And he said, oh, I want to be chairman so badly. And I said, well, and there's no guarantee you'll even be elected a school board member. And he said, no, I've been on this board too long. I want to be chairman. I want to continue the good work that you're doing. Thank you. So I think most people understand. And if you have somebody who's an elected official currently on your board, don't say, oh, you have to get off the board or anything, but always maybe have the board chairman at the beginning of a new year with new board members talk about being neutral. I always say, if I come in and they're talking about something political, I say, hold it, Switzerland, remember we're all Switzerland here. Let's talk about something fun. What did you do last weekend? Where did you go on vacation? Oh, I hear you went on a river cruise. Can you tell us about it? Just kind of pull it away or talk about something. Did I tell you the great site visit I had where I went out and I met with this organization and you wouldn't believe how many horses they've trained for special needs children, and then just put it on another topic. Always have something to pull out to diffuse and divide any type of political discussion at your board table. Don't have a nominating committee, but rather a governance committee. This is kind of, I don't want to say new age, that sounds kind of negative, but a new thinking from nonprofit board management. If you have a nominating committee, they just get appointed, they work for a month, maybe they choose new board members, you have a file of people. Governance is something that goes on the entire time. So maybe they do an assessment of board performance. They talk about new things that are going on. They evaluate the needs of the board. I've got that material at the end. Or they develop a profile of people that are needed to fill in open board vacancies. They help the board find the right people to fill board positions. And that should be an ongoing effort. That shouldn't just be the last 6 weeks of the year where people are looking around at holiday parties going, have you ever thought about being on our board? I really like what I do, knowing that you really need to find somebody in the next 10 days because the board meeting's coming up. Been there, done that. Been on boards where we have looked at, okay, who can we get? Who can we get? You know, like, oh, well, maybe we should get, and have it be an ongoing effort, and to have the board continually referring to you or the governance committee ideas for board members. So governance committee duties would include ensuring diversity on the board. They carry out the board orientation along with the organization's senior staff. That would be either the board chairman could be there or the head of the governance committee or both, and your senior staff meeting with a new board member. It's kind of fun if you have that opportunity to schedule 2 board members at the same time. Then that they kind of play off each other and they get to know their new board member. They're all peers and entering the board on the same time, but that's not a necessity. For most organizations, a nominating committee has 2 duties: fill vacant board seats and elect officers, or provide a slate for the election of officers. Replace it with a governance committee. You will never regret that. You will never say, oh my goodness, we should have kept the nominating committee. This is a more effective and efficient use of people. Give, get, or get off. Have you heard that term before? That's kind of a fundraising slogan for board members. So if you're going to give, or you're going to get more money, or just get off. Well, let's replace it with gather. The first step is to bring the board to agree that fundraising is a board responsibility, and then get ready. The next step is to prepare the board for fundraising or friendraising. And grow is the last step, is the board then implementing the development plan and then watching donors and contributions grow. So gather, get ready, and grow. It sounds a little more professional than give, get, or get off. So what a board member should know. What does a board member need to know about being on a nonprofit board? Can everyone on your board answer these questions? Once in a while, we have a staff meeting, and I'll ask these questions in our staff meeting. What is your organization's annual budget? What are your current sources of income, and what would be the best mix of income for your organization? Are you grants? Are you donors? Are you federal money? Are you state money? Are you United Way? Where are your sources of income, and would it be better to have a third, a third, a third instead of 80-20? Is they should know what the pros and cons of that are. What are your largest expenses? What percentage of the budget do they consume? I would dare say your largest expenses would be a staff, that you're looking at the majority of that staff. And then that would mean that you maybe need somebody with some expertise in HR. If you don't have a full-time HR person, then it would be good to have somebody on the board that could just give you an FYI about law. A couple of years ago, I called the Council on Foundations, which nationally has about 800 community foundations, and they have a legal department, and I said, what is the greatest source of lawsuits for nonprofits and community foundations in particular? They said far and above personnel. HR, people that are just unhappy with a job situation, and then turn around whistleblowers, how you handle whistleblowers. You have to have a whistleblower policy, conflicts of interest, everything dealing with staff. It's not the donor that says, you didn't use my money the way I expected to. That's very rare. It is 90% of all law and legal situations with a nonprofit are going to be with your personnel. So that does something that you talk about, and you have the guidance of somebody who has some HR background. Does your organization have a reserve fund? How much is in it, and under what circumstances can it be used? Now, what a board member should also know is, what is the biggest financial risk? What is the thing that is going to happen? If you're 90% funded by the federal government, is it going to be that you lose your federal funding and giving you 90 days notice? Is the risk going to be that your largest donor that's giving a large amount of money to you on an annual basis, that person moves or passes away? What is the biggest financial risk? And you should discuss that openly with your board. You don't need to add, confidentiality is so important with donors. Any good fundraiser will tell you that you do not divulge the name. You can give the name of the donor, but don't divulge the amount. Is always keep that confidential, especially if you get memorial gifts. You can give a list of people who have given gifts in behalf of a loved one in a memorial fund. You could say this person donated and then give the name and the address, but never, ever divulge the amount of money. I had one widow that was just adamant, that wanted to know what the amounts of money were. And she said, well, other nonprofits do it. I don't understand why you won't give me the money. I said, well, that's just us. That's the legal and fiduciary responsibility that we have to a donor. And that's me, as my ethics, is I'm promising confidentiality as a fundraising person. Well, eventually we settled on that we did 0 to 50, 51 to 150, 150 to 500, 500, you know, just put segments on it and make them pretty broad so that that person is going, wow, I never knew that they would, you know, $1,000. Well, she wrote an extra long thank you note, but it was the idea that she just wanted to have some degree of control and recognize you're dealing with grief. And people have different stages of grief. And she was very angry that her husband was taken suddenly with a brain tumor in less than 90 days. And she was just angry at everything. And you have to recognize that you're dealing with very, very human frailties, and to look at what you can do to help them through that situation. What would help you understand your organization's financial situation more clearly, and how do you use financial management tools to measure impact? Does your organization compute the per unit of service? So if you have so many big brothers and big sisters, and you have how many children do they work with, and then you take your administrative budget and look at your cost per unit. Are they able to say, oh my gosh, I didn't know, just like you would compute the cost per square foot of buying a new home, look at what your cost per unit of no matter what you're serving. Is it a per acre saved, or perhaps that you're working in a cultural nonprofit, and is how many people are attending a concert or an art show or whatever you're doing, and trying to figure it out. My husband has a great, he grew up in a farm actually just right over the river, and in Lower Rock Island County, and so he's one of those people that would come to Muscatine, but his favorite saying is, the juice ain't worth the squeezing. And you've got to look at some of the things that you do and go, oh man, we love that art show and the artists love it, but only 10 people showed up on a rainy, snowy Friday night. So maybe next year we should hold it in the spring, or do whatever you can to look at what are the barriers of attendance. And so looking at your efficient and effective use of the dollars that you are entrusted with. I went through some additional resources as boardsource.org. It's formerly the National Center for Nonprofit Boards. It was founded in 1988. If you ever see a nonprofit board session on nonprofit governance or management by Board Source. They have excellent speakers, and it's worth every penny. And most of them are day-long sessions throughout the region. I know that they've come to Iowa City. I've known to come to the Quad Cities. I'm not sure if they've been in Muscatine, but they are a great source of ongoing nonprofit organization. Plus, their books and their online materials are very good. Don't be shy about going and accessing their website. There's a lot of nonprofit information. That also, I mentioned earlier at the AFP, if you go to the AFP, do they like a gavel? Do they want a picture of the other board members? What are the things that they like for recognition? Also, she's got that kind of Canada-U.S. perspective on how grateful we should be for the tax laws that we have. Even with the increase of the standard deduction to 24.4 and looking at possible decrease in giving, we've still got donor advised funds and charitable tax contributions, and our estate tax has increased. You know, the level of what is being taxed is increased upon death. We've got a number of things going for us that Canada and even Europe do not have as far as charitable tax law. And sometimes it's interesting. We think we complain about it, but we are far and above the most charitable country in the world. And our donors should appreciate it and acknowledge that they can give from the heart, but they also have some very good advantages tax-wise. So the AFP Quad Cities also has a listing of job openings that you can post on there if you're a member of AFP, or you pay a nominal fee. I think it's $50 or $100 that you can post. If you need a staff person, it's kind of the go-to place in the region for posting job notices. Additional resources, looking at the books that I just went through, and so Asking, Drive, Start With Why, Giving 2.0 is those things that, those resources and books and materials that you can either check out or purchase and possibly have a book club at your nonprofit. Do you ever think your staff members need a little guided conversation that you don't want to have them, you know, in the coffee room or the break room over the lunch hour? How about having a monthly book club and having it with a book that's germane to your organization or nonprofit management? Very last slide is if you have questions, contact me. I also put my business card on all of the handouts. It's your get out of jail free card. Actually, the first person you should call is your attorney if you're having financial problems or anything else. But if you just want to talk over a situation and you're thinking, I want somebody who's totally neutral, confidential, just give me a call, please. If I don't know the answer, I will find somebody else in the business. There are 1,700 nonprofits in Rock Island County and 1,400 nonprofits in Scott County. I'm not sure. I think there are about half of the 500, 600 in Muscatine County that file a 990 or a 990 PF in your community. You would be just shocked if you looked at the number of nonprofits. Now, we've been around 65 years of the Moline Foundation, and we've only funded 820 nonprofits. So there are a good twice as many that could be coming and asking us for funds in our communities. So always be aware is that you need the excellence, you need the good board members, you need the participation of your staff and your staff working with the board members. I also think it's wise to, if you don't have pictures on the wall or the opportunity to have that on the wall of your office of your board members, then have a group picture and bring it into a staff meeting every once in a while or the lunchroom and say, who's that? Oh, that's Tom Smith. Oh, who's that? And so that they could greet them by name, not only if they come into the office, but if they see them at a place of worship, if they see them in the grocery store, if they see them on the street, your board members are gold. absolute gold, and you should treat them like that, and that's an important thing to remember. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
Noticing this in other groups, so what's your thinking on that?
Well, there are board members' ethics policies that they can sign at that orientation, and of course they have to sign a conflict of interest. Now, do you remember Sarbanes-Oxley? It seems like a long time ago, but actually as a result of the Enron scandal, there were 3 things that were put into place that should be in your personnel manual as well as your board orientation packet. And that's a whistleblower's policy that would apply to your, and just Google whistleblower's policy. I do a day-long session, and I actually give a copy of it, and email me if you need something. But there's also a conflict of interest policy, and it's not so much that they know, at the beginning of a board meeting, you might say, oh, I'm on this board, or my wife is the head of the hospital foundation or the auxiliary, and so you know that if you're going to be doing work with them or subcontracting and getting services for your clients, that maybe that's an opportunity for them to acknowledge a conflict of interest. So if you have on the back page, on the last 2 handouts, are a sample board overview of looking at people. What are the demographics or the expertise in or the influence in, and then put board members' names, and this could be helped and maintained by your governance committee and certainly by your senior staff. That's just what are the board members and we need. I actually served on the Iowa State Alumni Board of Directors, and they were just religious about filling this out. They were trying to satisfy the class of 59 as well as the class of 82, and so they had a very rigid, we need somebody in marketing, we need somebody, and they programmed it out, so then when they had board nominations and people voluntarily submitted a board nomination, then they were able to look and say, oh, look, that person's from the class of 82, let's snatch him or her up, you know, that they would be requiring that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I have another one though. So in regard to your bylaws, how often should you be looking at those and updating them and so on?
In regard to the bylaws, is what kind of review you should have was the question. And I would again put that with your governance committee. Some people have their executive committee look at it. I would say at least an annual or every other year. It's one of those things, they shouldn't sit on a shelf, that the circumstances and the times change. Witness, when I came on board, the bylaws hadn't been changed since we were first incorporated in 1953 with our initial gift. And certainly the largest women's organization in Moline there are very, very few women that are involved in that once thriving 500 to 600 member women's organization. So you look at what you're actually asking out of your board, and having the governance committee go through and just say, oh, we've changed this, or our office location has changed. And don't be afraid about sending a notice of changes to the IRS, whether it's your office or you use your FEIN number and your IRS, your nonprofit letter. You can go ahead and just when you move, when you change your phone number, it's just everyday occurrence to them. It's not going to change your nonprofit status.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, Word is a good place to get board members that really catch on to what we do and will want to stay with it and continue on. We really don't have term limits because we just have this group of people. So Word is a good place to get more interested people in what we do.
Look at your donors. Also ask your board members to confidentially give you names or give the names to the governance committee. Sometimes people are reluctant to have a free-for-all on suggesting Tom Smith in public, as saying, oh, I golf with Tom and he used to be with Han, he's the CFO, he's a great guy, and somebody else will go, oh, we had him on our church board and I don't want to say anything, but he was really bad news. And so to make that be a more of a neutral discussion, and then you can look at your qualifications, and then you can honestly go back to that board member and say, I appreciate you suggesting Tom Smith, but right now we need somebody with some marketing and fundraising expertise, not somebody in accounting or a CFO. Now, where do you find board members like that? I think that a good place to look for board members is not only on your donor list, but also if you have a good relationship with an attorney or a CPA, ask them for a financial or accounting person. Is there a former head of the Muscatine legal aid, or does you need legal expertise? Then look at who's the head of the bar association, or who's somebody that's a new partner in a law firm that they're looking to get involved in the community. I just had a woman call me yesterday and said, can you recommend some boards I get involved in? She works for a bank and they've given her 2 months to find a volunteer experience. They value so much their people being involved in the community, from tellers up to vice presidents. You have to, part of your annual evaluation is looking at your volunteer experience. So know those companies, ask them, or their HR person, develop responsibilities. I always used to, when I ran the Moline Public Schools Foundation back in the 80s, is I would go to the principals, and they know, I wanted a list of all the former PTA presidents, and then just go through and say yes, no, maybe. Not any comments. I don't want any editorial comments. Just would they be good on our board? And, you know, they knew the ones that they would have political issues with or problems or would be divisive about the treatment of their children. We want the people who are neutral and truly just enjoy public education, and we wanted those people on there. So maybe look at who are you serving, or if you want to involve young people, you know, not young people, not those 16 and 18-year-olds that don't know how to read a financial statement, but also the people that are in their 30s and 40s and the millennials, is, you know, don't put it on Facebook, please. Don't tweet it or put it on Instagram. You will get everything. And you want to make it more of a privilege and a special thing that we have asked you to be on the board. Does that help? Okay, and your question. Are you sure? Okay. Anybody else? Well, thanks so much, everybody. I've enjoyed being here. Good luck with anything, and remember to give me a call if you have a question or there's anything else I can help you out with. Do right, be good.